How come so many firefighters don't become paramedics? Hey, this is Billy Goldfeder. This is What's Your Problem, brought to you by Lexapol and firerescue1.com, where I provide you with some opinions on some stuff that's going on out in our business. This one in particular came from a discussion with several hundred comments on firerescue1.com. So I wanted to kind of give you my thoughts on this. And basically the discussion is why so many firefighters don't become paramedics. And I guess I want to share with you the first observation I had was in all the responses and all the comments and all that kind of stuff. Very few were focused on what the public's needs are. So again, like a lot of things we do in this program, you're going to like and not like some of the things I say, and it doesn't matter. I appreciate you taking time to listen in, and then you can formulate your own opinions. But really, my response, I'm going to start at the bottom up. And the bottom line, in my opinion, is healthcare is a disaster in our country. That's the issue. Our having to go to these types of runs that we don't want to go to, and us not wanting to become paramedics, and us because we're getting burned out, is because the healthcare system's a disaster. And as you saw, whether it's with Obamacare or this care or that care, the right and the left elected officials in Washington, D.C. cannot get their act together to come up with one system that addresses the whole healthcare issue. There's people that believe the poor shouldn't get free health care. There's people that believe the rich should pay more. You know what? That could be a whole other discussion. But here's the bottom line. We have to deal with the cards we're dealt. In other words, we have to respond. We're the last chance for anybody. And we have to respond. And we means you as a medic. We means you as a firefighter, EMT, first responder, private, volunteer, paid, not paid, whatever you are. The bottom line is you're the 911. So when all that system is failing, what does the public know? You know, Dennis Smith, when he wrote Report from Engine Company 82, had a quote in there that, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but basically said, you can call for the police and they may or may not show up. You can call sanitation and they may or may not pick up your garbage. But when you go to the red box on the corner and you pull the box, you know you're going to get help responding. And that's 911. That's the fire service in this country. The people know that the firefighters are going to come. So if you call about a steam leak, you have a water leak in your home, your kid's arm is caught in a high chair, or you have a fire or a drowning or a heart attack, the most reliable system in this country is the fire service. Whether we provide EMS, I'm not getting into that, okay? But you dial 911 and we're on our way. Now, in some areas that may also be a private ambulance. That's great. They play a very critical role in healthcare in our country, in emergency medical service. But consider there's a firehouse near everyone in suburban and in metropolitan United States, right? We are trained to save lives. You shouldn't have to be on fire for us to do that. Now, I'm going to get into the paramedic stuff and the advanced stuff in just a minute. But I think it's hard to argue, and it's hard to fight this battle. The fact is, there's an engine company, there's a ladder company down the block, and we have some basic training to save your life. Now, should we be going on what you would call a stub toe? That's up to you locally, whether your leadership wants to go or not. Personally, I think we should go to everything. Why? Because it's positive PR for us. The firefighters showed up again. Doesn't mean we can't respond to a fire if we're dealing with a stub toe. The ambulance gets there, whatever it is. Or we don't even send the ambulance. And again, I know some of you are going insane right now listening to this. But let's focus on what's best for the public, okay? And again, what's best for the public is a better healthcare system. But until that gets dealt with, and I'm not sure when that's going to be dealt with, we're the last resort. When everything else fails, we respond, we show up, we help. So let's go a little bit more in advance of the stub toe, because that's probably not the best example. You're having trouble breathing. You're having chest pains, something like that. You've got uncontrolled bleeding. How can we not respond? See, again, we forget the public owns this stuff. It's their apparatus. It's their engine, their ladder, us, okay? Paid or volunteer. And I don't care if you're a volunteer fire company that does fundraising. The public still paid that money to buy those trucks. So whether it's tax-based or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's their stuff. So we have an obligation to go on a life-threatening emergency, bleeding, airway, things like that. So that to me is a no-brainer, and that should be happening across this country. The other non-critical stuff, that has to be dealt with locally based upon your resources. I would say if you got a career EMS system of some kind, whether it's fire, EMS based, and someone stubs their toe, somebody should go. Should we send a ladder or an engine first? Probably not. Okay, that's a basic first aid, right? Old term. That's a basic first aid response to take care of that problem. However, if the company is in quarters and they're available, maybe the whole company doesn't go. Maybe we send one person in an SUV to take care of that tow. Again, it depends on your resources. It depends on your career, your volunteer. And the reason I mention that is, should we be, quote, bothering volunteers to take care of someone's stubbed toe at 3 o'clock in the morning, or should that be a career level type service? Probably that should be a career level type service, saving the volunteer for the real emergency or the more critical emergency. Again, I know some of you are going nuts right now. Some of you have probably applied for EAP assistance based upon some of my comments, but we've got to focus on a couple things. One is understand there is no one solution. Every community is different. Different resources, different training, different funding avenues, funding revenue. And are you rural? Are you suburban? All that has to fit into this model, okay? Now, let's go to the next part of this question. Why don't, and we're just going to take generic firefighter, primarily career, and why don't they become paramedics? And I'm going to revert back again to what I said earlier, because the system is woefully broken. The healthcare system in our nation is woefully broken. And because of that, I'll give you an example. Someone very close to me worked on a paramedic engine company doing 20, 25 runs a shift, where easily 70 to 80% of those runs did not require the services of a paramedic engine company. The system is broken. What they're trying to do is just get help as quickly as possible based upon this national health care issue, right? So should you be going to 20, 25 runs a shift with 75 or 80% of the runs being you just absolutely were not the right resource, and someone in an SUV with a first aid kit could have taken care of most of those? Yes. Another part of the problem is the system that's used to determine what gets sent to the call. Many areas use a system where, based upon the questions you're asking the caller, is the kind of resources you send. In theory, that's a great system. The cards where you know, are you having trouble breathing? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? In theory, that's great. But here's what happens. Are you having trouble breathing? Well, a little. Boom. Now it's an ALS call. The screening system, but again, it falls into the whole healthcare problem. That person calling and coughing, and maybe it's their fourth or fifth time this week, that person needs to be dealt with away from the fire and EMS. This is a healthcare issue. Again, until the healthcare system gets fixed, we are the last resort. So we have to accept the fact that there are going to be a measurable amount of not necessarily calls that we're going to be going on, all right? It doesn't mean when we get there we act like a bunch of spoiled brats. We're angry. You woke us up. We don't like these kind of calls. Stop. At that point, you decide whether or not you want to function within this career or not, whether you want to do it, understanding that there's going to be these BS calls. To answer the question specifically, why do so many firefighters don't become paramedics? There's a couple of arguments in this. Somebody made a comment that because it's a whole different field, it's a whole different area of training. I say it's an extension of what we do. There are many, many successful fire rescue services running ALS, and it works just fine. A lot of times it's because the leadership of the organization has been successful in understanding what the folks who our firefighter paramedics need. Maybe they shouldn't be on a 24-hour shift on that same truck doing 30 runs and having to deal with that 30-run issue. Maybe we rotate units around. I don't know. It depends on, again, locally. Almost all our issues are local, right? But it's the system that forces people to not want to do this. I don't want to deal with Mrs. Smith, who's called us 9 times in the last 4 days. That needs to be dealt with a different letter. So there's one reason firefighters don't want to become paramedics. Another is they just want to go to fires. Well, unless you're in like about a 2 or 3% area of this country where they're actually going to a lot of fires, you're going to be bored. And unfortunately, politically, when they see us, quote, sitting around, which we know is not necessarily the case, that opens us wide up for issues related to our staffing, our equipment, our responses, things like that. So some would say we just became involved with EMS and we became paramedics to stay busy to justify our jobs. I don't agree with that. We became paramedics and EMS providers because it made sense. The firehouse down the street, the firehouse at the corner, they can get there quickly and we can provide some level of help until another level arrives, or we are the level, depending upon what it is. So some say it's because we're cramming 2 jobs into one. I think it's dependent upon the individual and the organization they work for. Again, there are some very successful ALS fire rescue services around the country, and it works just fine. And again, in a lot of cases, that's because the leadership understands that there has to be some way of dealing with the burnout, way of dealing with the amount of runs you're going on and the amount of runs that you're not needed on, but yet you get there. Another thing is this. We recruit typically with a picture of a firefighter that looks like they're coming out of backdraft, carrying a baby, kicking down walls and stuff like that. And of course, we do that from time to time. But on a typical shift almost anywhere in North America, you're going to be going on an EMS run far more than you're going to be going on a fire call. We need to tell people that. When we recruit, we need to say that if your department is a fire rescue service providing EMS, we need to tell them that, hey, EMS is a critical part of what we do. So let's revisit the question one last time in the end, why so many firefighters don't become paramedics? It depends on the system. It depends on your agency. It depends on what the incentives are. And I don't just mean financial incentives. I mean incentives as far as, hey, if you're on a unit doing so many calls, is there a break process? Is there a rotation of 2 units? And again, we can't do that. We're not getting that deep into the weeds today. I'm just saying, look at the big picture and how can we make it where firefighters want to provide EMS and more so want to become paramedics. If we don't, someone else will. And you may like that, okay? If we end up having this much resistance to it, which I don't think really is a big deal, I think we have a lot of areas where it's working just fine, and we have some areas that it's not, and those areas need to be fixed based upon local solutions. But also, don't forget, the real reason we're having this conversation is because the healthcare in our country is a disaster. As far as dealing with people, the frequent flyer folks, getting the proper care that they need, the billing, right? There's a whole nother issue. A lot of cities get into EMS transport so they can derive income. Not the way to do it. If your focus is not on the patient, you're wasting your time. So whether it's a firefighter, whether you're a firefighter paramedic, whether you're an EMT or a paramedic separate from fire, or you're the local government, until we focus on what's best for the patient, which has to be done at a national and state level, we're going to have these discussions for a long, long time. Thank you. Hey, send me your ideas, your thoughts, your problems, issues. I'll be glad to address them on here. I hope you find this of interest. Take care.